For 1,400 years, it has been a holy pilgrimage to a sacred site.
For a Muslim raised in Islam particularly, it is very strongly a feeling of coming home.
A site you are forbidden to enter unless you are Muslim. And if you are a Muslim, it is a sacred duty, an act of faith.
There's a sense of return, which really involves the human heart when you come to Mecca.
Tonight, the Hajj, one American's pilgrimage to Mecca. There is a city near the west coast of Saudi Arabia across the Red Sea from Sudan, and the name of that city is Mecca. 5 times every day, no matter where in the world they are, devout Muslims face in the direction of Mecca to say their prayers. More than 5 million of those Muslims live among us here in the United States, more American Muslims than Jews. Throughout the world, there are more Muslims than Roman Catholics. And if you were inclined to believe that most Muslims are Arabs, you would be wrong. By far the largest number of Muslims come from outside the Middle East, over 150 million from Indonesia alone. At least once in his or her lifetime, every Muslim is expected to make the pilgrimage, or Hajj, to Mecca. This is the time of year, between the 7th and 12th days of the last month of the Islamic year, when the Hajj is made. Usually, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million Muslims come to Mecca each year at this time. And the Saudi government routinely makes pictures of the Hajj available around the world. But for an American reporter to have access to Mecca and the Hajj, he would need to be a Muslim. Which is why we turn to Michael Wolf to take us where no non-Muslim has ever been.
Islam means acknowledging the oneness of God, surrendering to it, cooperating with the way things are. I am a Muslim. I revere the same God as my Christian mother and my Jewish father. Allah is simply the Arabic word for the God of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. I find the absence of priests and rabbis attractive. Being a Muslim, God is as near as the veins in my neck. This directness is most apparent on the pilgrimage. You embrace your religion, you take part in a spiritual drama, very public and very personal all at once. The Hajj begins at one of 5 stations specified by the Prophet Muhammad. Here we enter the state of ritual purity called Ihram. For men, the required dress of the Hajj is 2 unstitched lengths of white cotton cloth and a pair of sandals. Women traditionally wear plain forms of their usual dress. The garments are a symbol. The person who wears them agrees not to harm plants and animals or fellow pilgrims. No arguments, no violence. We agree to keep the peace. The garments are a great leveler, too. Who can tell rich from poor? At the start, I have to accept how naked and frail I feel in these bath towels and try to remember what they mean. They're hard to get used to at first because, in a way, they put an end to my everyday identity. I set aside what I thought made me special, my roots as an American, my work as a writer, my worries, aspirations, all my plans. Here I join people from all over the earth, all these human beings drawn at the same time simply by the call of an idea, by the oneness of God. Pilgrims recite a special set of verses, announcing their readiness to serve God. Here I am, Lord, at your service. Here I am. You have no equal. I am here. Truly, the praise and the favor are yours, and the kingdom. You have no equal. As we all approach Mecca, that long-imagined city, there is a little uncertainty. What will it really be like? Will I perform the Hajj without error? Will it be acceptable to God? To preserve its sanctity and protect pilgrims, the sacred territory around Mecca is forbidden to all but Muslims. It lies hidden in the mountains 50 miles from the Red Sea, a modern city of 1.2 million people.
Ah, there's the minarets.
As we arrive, the great mosque plays hide and seek with us. Tantalizing glimpses of a minaret and arch come and go in the traffic. This is the center of the Muslim world. There are people from everywhere.
I'm from Nigeria.
From Islamabad.
From Egypt.
Indonesia.
Morocco.
From Palestine.
China.
Bangladesh.
Japan.
And the United States. I meet a group of American servicemen, Muslims, many of them veterans of the Gulf War 6 years ago. Here in Mecca, that conflict seems so distant.
Islam showed me that all mankind could be together. I mean, so when I see another brother, as soon as I meet these brothers on the way, I love them at first for the sake of Allah.
This is something that America could learn from this situation, from this religious experience, that all of mankind can get along.
We have left daily life behind and come to a place hardly belonging to this world, a place filled by the almost tangible presence of God.
أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله.
All their lives in mosques around the world, Muslims have formed into straight rows to face the Kaaba. Now, and only in Mecca, these prayer lines become circular.
سمع الله لمن حمده.
This is the sacred Kaaba, the house of God first built by Abraham. It is the symbol of God's oneness. The verses embroidered in gold are from the Quran. Behold, the first temple ever set up for mankind, rich in blessings, a source of guidance for the world, full of clear messages. And anyone who comes here finds inner peace.
I feel like I see all my brothers in rainbow colors, but they are all Muslims. And I'm proud to see them. And I stand shoulder to shoulder with them.
In the year 610, on the tallest mountain above Mecca, the Prophet Muhammad received the first verses of the Quran. By the time of the Prophet's death, Islam reached well beyond Mecca into the greater Middle East. A vast majority of the world's Muslims, 80%, now live outside the Middle East. There are more than 5 million in the U.S. Walking around the block in Mecca is a walk around the world. I step out the door and for 15 yards I'm in Indonesia. Down the street, past a couple of stores, and it's Africa. Pakistan is just around the corner. Look, here's Bangladesh. Where I live, most people think of prayer as a private affair reserved for the bedside, the graveside, the Sunday service. For a Muslim, when the hour arrives, the whole world turns into a mosque, including this crowded market. We hear the call and lay out our carpets. I borrow one from a bookstore owner. When the prayer ends, a few minutes later, people fold their carpets and continue on their way. In Mecca, the formal rites of the pilgrimage begin in the Great Mosque. We follow in the path of the Prophet Muhammad, who created the Hajj from a collection of much older rites. The first obligation is to circle 7 times around the Kaaba, following the direction of the earth around the sun. We surround the foundations of our religion. This is a form of prayer, an expression of our desire to put God at the center of our lives. Each circuit begins and ends at the black stone, the symbolic cornerstone of Islam, the only remnant of Abraham's original building. The Prophet Muhammad once touched it with his lips, and some pilgrims kiss the stone today. Most make do with a gesture, like people warming their hands before a fire. After 7 circuits, I go downstairs to drink from the Zamzam well. Without the water from this well, Mecca could never have existed. In the second obligation, we reenact an ancient family drama, the story of a mother and son abandoned in a desert. Here, Hagar ran 7 times back and forth between the hills of Safa and Marwa in a desperate search for water. Finally, the Zamzam well was revealed to her by God. The story dramatizes God's compassion for those in need, a reminder never to give up hope, to keep moving in the direction of salvation.
should go with the flow. We should go with the movement, you know?
Yes.
Because it's like a sea of people just carrying on and on and on. And eventually, you know, you get into this flow that you're not yourself, because you give yourself totally over to your Creator, Allah.
There are some 2 million of us here. So many of us have come from so far away, all sharing in one purpose, all offering our pilgrimage to God. But all of this is really just the beginning. In the early morning, we take to the road. A trickle at first, then a stream, a river, and then there are 2 million of us, white-robed people tending in one direction, a continuous flood of men and women. It is the beginning of a 5-day journey into the desert. The first stop, 7 miles from Mecca, is the tent city of Mina. From there, we will travel another 5 miles to the plain of Arafat, returning to Mina via Muzdalifa. We trade city streets and buildings for tents and carpets on the sand of a barren plain, giving up our usual comforts, getting back to basics. Muhammad al-Arkas has come here from the eastern part of Saudi Arabia. He is a sheikh, a teacher. For a while, we walked together.
I have been stripped into 2 pieces of cloth, into simple, basic life. Now that you have left everything behind you, you find yourself thinking, having time to ask yourself, what is the purpose of life?
That question is especially significant on a day when more than 340 of us will die. A fire sweeps through part of the tent city in Mina where pilgrims from India and Pakistan are encamped. Apart from the deaths, more than 1,300 people are injured. Over 14 centuries, pilgrims have often perished in large numbers from fire or disease or caravan raiders. Yet mourners are uniquely consoled by a deeply shared belief that people who die here receive a special blessing, go straight to heaven.
They came in search of mercy from the Almighty. They are blameless, so they are martyrs. I wish to die like this, to leave my country and die on holy land.
Pilgrims follow the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad toward the plain of Arafat. The majority of us make the journey on foot, about 5 miles in 90-degree heat. Despite the cooling spray, it is not an easy trip. Cold water is provided, and in some places, bread and fruit. Anonymous donations for poor pilgrims date back to the beginnings of the Hajj. Finally, the plain of Arafat, where Adam and Eve are said to have been reunited after leaving the garden, a sort of lost and found for souls. Here we perform the central obligation of the pilgrimage, to be here together from noon until sunset. There is no ceremony. We stroll, we pray, we meditate. The Hajj goes on inside the hearts and thoughts of each of us. The only real feature on the plain of Arafat is a small hill called the Mount of Mercy. The point of the hill is not to climb it, but to see with your heart what it means. On this hill, just before he died, the Prophet Muhammad delivered the final verses of the Quran, the Word of God. And he warned his followers, you will meet your Lord, and you will be accountable for your actions. This is a rehearsal for that day of judgment. How will we account for our acts? Have I injured anyone? Have I been grateful enough for the simple gifts of life, water, food, friends, family, the air I breathe?
I am insignificant, and God is so great. Yet I have a one-to-one conversation and a promise to accept that, my prayers.
We wait for the sun to set. It is a special time. At this point, the conscience of a pilgrim who has performed the Hajj properly is wiped clean. But the obligations of the Hajj give us no time to dwell on that. The flood tide of 2 million people begins to ebb back in the direction of Mina. Each of us is required to stop along the way, to step off the road here at Muzdalifa. I gather 49 pebbles, each about the size of a pea. So what I do is I tie them into my ihram so I don't lose them. I will need these pebbles at our next destination. They are my weapons against the devil. Here I practice fighting temptation, throwing pebbles at a pillar representing Satan. It is an athletic release from the complex obligations of the Hajj. We will do this 3 times. The pillar marks the place where Satan tempted the prophet Abraham, who drove him off with stones. After a ritual sacrifice, pilgrims conclude the Hajj by circling the Kaaba 7 times and running 7 times between the hills again. It is best to leave Mecca soon after throwing our last stones. The place should remain unique, not grow familiar. We visit the Kaaba one last time. For most of us, this will be our last glimpse of the shrine. There is an old proverb: before you visit Mecca, it beckons to you. When you leave it behind, it calls to you forever. This is Michael Wolf for Nightline in Mecca.
When we come back, a conversation I had with Michael Wolf during his pilgrimage from Islam's holiest shrine, the Great Mosque in Mecca. We've received an enormous amount of help from Saudi television. Indeed, it's no exaggeration to say that we would not be able to show you the picture we are showing you now without the help of Saudi television. Michael Wolf, who has been our host, our guide, our narrator throughout this program, joins us now from the Great Mosque at Mecca. And Michael, just to set the scene, tell us where we are and what we're looking at.
Well, we're looking at the Great Mosque of Mecca, the oldest building in Islam, really, is directly behind me. That's the large black cube called the Kaaba. High up in the air we have minarets, a little lower the buildings of Mecca, and then the 3 floors of this enormous mosque, which tonight is a little less full than it has been in the last week.
Just talk for a moment about your own feelings. In a sense, this one has to be a little bit mixed because on the one hand, you've been working and helping us to understand what's going on. On the other hand, it's clearly a very personal and intimate and spiritual experience for those who go through it. Give us a sense of that, would you?
Well, any pilgrim who comes here to perform the Hajj, myself included, is fulfilling, first of all, a religious obligation the first time they come. Secondly, and for me, now that I'm here for the second time, this is also a chance for everyone who comes to Mecca, who can manage to make the journey, a chance to get back to basics. It's a chance to remember that we have things to be grateful for, beginning with the air and the water and the food and that we consume and the natural world that supports us. And it's quite extraordinary to see 2 million people in this frame of mind all at once. It's very difficult not to meet people in Mecca, and it's a great pleasure to do so. As I said earlier in the program, a walk around the block here really is a walk around the world.
Are there any acquaintances that you've made over these last few days that stand out in particular?
I've met some wonderful figures from South Africa, individuals who have put the Hajj in perspective for me in a couple of dozen words over a cup of tea. Very interesting encounters. So this sort of moving around, which I enjoy greatly, and simply slipping into small stores and stopping on a street corner and wishing someone a successful Hajj inevitably develops into a conversation of some sort. And we've tried to show that somewhat in the show. These are for the most part, these are not set up conversations we're dealing with here. They're opportunities that we have had the camera about, but it's not hard to meet people and even to photograph them.
You think you'll ever be back?
Well, as we say here, inshallah, God willing, I hope so. I enjoy this town greatly.
Michael, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for giving us an insight into something that without your help, most of us would never have seen. It's been extraordinary.
Thank you very much.
I'll be back with a final thought in a moment. It does seem sometimes that major religions expend a lot of energy working at cross purposes to some of their own goals. Each of the great monotheistic religions, after all, emphasizes its own uniqueness, its own particular access to the Creator, at the same time that it acknowledges God's limitless love, forgiveness, and understanding for all people. It is hard to envision such a God condemning hundreds of millions of people simply because they lack the foresight to be born into the religion that we happen to believe in, or because in later years they remained faithful to the religion of their birth. It should certainly be difficult to look at the great throngs of Muslims that we've seen tonight, men and women from all over the world, indistinguishable from one another by education or class, income or station, united in their common belief, and to feel anything other than respect, affection, and a sense that we are all much more alike than our various affiliations sometimes lead us to believe. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.